Hi everyone. For my research project, I focused on the Code of Hammurabi. It's one of the oldest and most well-known law codes in history, and once I started looking into it, I realized it wasn't just a list of laws. It actually says a lot about how Babylon worked and how Hammurabi used laws, religion, and social structure to keep control of his society. So in this recording, I'm going to explain my topic, my thesis, and my main points I covered in my research essay. My thesis for this project is that the Code of Hammurabi was more than a legal document. Hammurabi used it as a political and religious tool to keep power, create a strict social order, and support unequal treatment between different groups in Babylon. So the laws weren't really about fairness, they were more about shaping society in a way that helped Hammurabi stay in charge. Let me start with what the code actually is. It was written in around 1750 BCE and includes 282 laws carved into a tall black stone called a stele. This stone was put out in public so people could see it. Even if they couldn't read, they could look up at the picture at the top, and that picture showed Hammurabi standing in front of Shamash, the god of justice, and Shamash is handing him a rod and a ring. That symbolized authority. Basically, it made people think that the laws came straight from a god, and that right there actually tells us that religion was being used to support Hammurabi's rule. Another thing I talked about in my research was earlier Mesopotamian laws. Hammurabi wasn't the first to write laws. There were older ones, like the laws of Namu. Those laws were shorter and way less harsh. And most punishments were fines instead of physical retaliation. And when you compare those with Hammurabi's code, you can see how much stricter things became. Hammurabi also divided people into three main social classes: nobles, commoners, and slaves. And the punishment someone received depended on which class they were in. So that part helped support my thesis because it showed the code wasn't about equal justice. It was structured to protect the upper class. Another main point I covered is how religion and kingship were connected. In Mesopotamia, people believed the gods controlled everything: nature, farming, war, and who ruled the land. Kings often claimed they were chosen by the gods. Hammurabi did this very strongly. In the prologue to the code, he says that the gods sent him to cause justice to prevail in the land. Even though the laws didn't treat people equally, this message made him look like a good and fair leader. And with the picture on the stele showing him receiving authority from Shamash, people would see the laws as divine. If they thought the laws came from the gods, they would be less likely to argue with them. Another big section in my project was about social inequality, and this is really obvious when you look at the code. People were not treated the same. For example, if a noble hurt another noble, the punishment might be an eye for an eye, but if a noble hurt a commoner, the noble only paid a fine. And if they hurt a slave, the punishment was even lighter. So basically the code protected nobles much, much more than anyone else. There was also gender inequality. Women were mainly under the control of men, and marriage was treated like a contract where the man had the most power. A husband could divorce his wife easily, but a wife couldn't really do the same. And if a wife committed adultery, she would be drowned, but if a husband did the same thing, he often wasn't punished unless it affected another man's marriage. So the code supported a patriarchal system where men had more rights and more freedom. Another part of my essay was about the use of punishments as a way to control the population. The code is famous for being harsh, but the harshness wasn't equal. It protected the upper classes while punishing the lower classes much more severely. The code also controlled how jobs were done. There were laws about farming, building, and medical work, and trading. One example I gave is that if a builder made a weak house and it collapsed and killed somebody, that builder would be executed. And that's extreme, but it shows that Hammurabi used the law to make people follow rules and stay in their assigned roles. Historians believe that these punishments helped keep order and prevent rebellion. The last big section of my project was about Babylonian beliefs. People believed that if the gods were angry, chaos could return. There's a story called Enuma Elish where the gods defeat chaos before creating the world. So when Hammurabi made the strict laws, people saw this as part of keeping the order in the world. If someone disobeyed the laws, they might think that it would upset the gods. So following the law wasn't just a legal thing, it was a religious responsibility. And that helped Hammurabi keep control over people's behavior. All of these points support my thesis that the code was more than just a legal document. It shaped society and protected the upper class and men, and used religion to support Hammurabi's authority and controlled daily life in Babylon. It wasn't just about justice, it was about power and order. So to wrap things up, the Code of Hammurabi helps us understand how ancient Babylon worked, and how rulers can use laws, religion, and social systems to control a civilization. Hammurabi built a system where he looked chosen by the gods, where nobles stayed in power, where everyone else had to follow strict rules. And that's why the code is still important today. It shows how law and authority can shape society in deep, deep ways.